Jordan Peterson, psychologist, philosopher, and now pop star.
Meaning is what you have to buttress yourself against the tragedy of life.
I've made a couple of documentaries about Jordan Peterson, including Glitch in the Matrix.
You came in from where?
I came in from London last night.
Then I discovered someone had done a musical remix of it.
And so what ended up happening was there was a break in the frame, there was a glitch in the matrix, break in the frame, there was a glitch in the matrix, break in the frame, there was a glitch in the matrix, break in the frame, there was a glitch in the matrix.
A DJ based in LA, Akira the Don. A week later, he happened to be in London. This is our talk.
When you're making music and writing and stuff, oftentimes you quote the greats. And you quote a Hunter S. Thompson or you quote a Young or whatever. But they're all dead. And they were audio, if there are audio recordings of them, they're not very good. And there aren't that many of them. And here we have Peterson, like spitting fucking napalm on a daily basis, like dropping like hours of audio every day, and it's all fucking brilliant and all incredibly quotable, and it's also incredibly sonorous, musical and beautiful and important and necessary right now. If I did nothing else in my life, if I didn't even eat, I could just sit there making Peterson music forever.
So it's been a bit of a roller coaster journey. Like I put out the Glitch in the Matrix documentary, and then Jordan Peterson got in touch to say, do you mind if I put it on my YouTube channel?
Oh, is that how that happened?
Yeah. Then it kind of raced to about 400,000 views in a couple of weeks. And then I found this remix of A Glitch in the Matrix that
Which
you'd
I did
done.
before he posted it, by the way.
Oh, wow.
I did that a good couple of weeks before. And it was fantastic. I was very excited when I found it. I actually stopped what I was doing. I normally get up, have a steak, go into the studio. And I got up and I was salting my steak, and that came up in my YouTube. Thank you to the YouTube algorithms. I'll get into this in a bit. But I put it on and then ended up just watching the whole thing rather than going straight into the studio. And it was fantastic, and I knew immediately that I wanted to do something with it musically, which I'd not done before. Normally I find sort of pieces of audio to tell a whole story that I already want to tell or what have you. But you'd basically done something that I wanted to do, and you'd done it perfectly. So it was like, okay, I just need to get the right music for this and it'll be a wonderful, useful thing.
Yeah, because I first saw it and I thought, oh wow, someone's put a backing track to the documentary, and I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. But then I watched it and I was like, no, there's some real production skill in here.
Yeah, that's been the reaction all over. I think that was Peterson's reaction.
Right.
He was instantly like, thought this was going to be silly and was amused, and then was like, oh, this is actually artful. And oh, now it's actually proving useful. And that's generally the reaction from people. Came for the memes, stayed for the amazingness or whatever. You think it's going to be silly, and that it is, and then it has silliness about it, I suppose. But it actually works on many levels. Particularly with that, the thing is with that is that I pretty much knew almost instantly as well what this sort of sonic palette was, which was this sort of sci-fi-ish dystopian vapor trap synth thing, which is quite specific. And then it's a case of
Is that my theme tune now then?
Yeah, it is, and it really fits with you. It fits with your voice, and it fits with the Britishness that comes to it. There's particularly now. I've been away for 3.5 years, and I came back, and things are very dystopic. It's like a kind of 80s BBC drama of the future aesthetic has become the truth. This idea we used to have of what the future might be like if things went a bit wrong.
But you're living in America, so you've got your own dystopian fantasy to worry about.
But the American dystopian fantasy is kind of sort of a Technicolor, almost Jack Kirby kind of like pop art thing. And the British one is this kind of like grim. It's like
It's more sort of George Orwell, I guess, or Aldous Huxley.
Yeah, Huxley had it completely right. But it's a lot like the movie of V for Vendetta. Being away for 3.5 years and coming back, it looks and sounds and feels like that. And it's all.
Ball's been writing our story for.
Yeah, he has,
Yeah.
Basically, it's like him and Grant Morrison. It's kind of the Orwell and Huxley thing. So you have these two ideas, and they're both kind of right. Although I would say Brave New World has thus far turned out to be a more accurate representation. But we don't get sexy drugs. We've got technology. We have the cocaine rush of the Facebook like versus actual good drugs. Yeah. That was one thing I was disappointed at. Lots of the future has come to pass in a way that I hoped it would, but drugs in the future are rubbish. Terrible things.
Now you've just got this little dopamine rush of a like, and that's our drug nowadays.
Yeah, it is. There's your little coke bump, and the actual drugs people take are like government versions of drugs we had in the 60s. So like government speed is in the shape of Adderall, and government cocaine, and government, what would you call Xanax? Smack. Government smack is the drug of choice for the youth of today, which is a very depressing state of affairs. You might as well stay indoors, like harvesting likes. Yeah, anyway, where were we?
Where were we? That's a good question.
Yeah. Glitch. Yeah, the beautiful, beautiful glitch, the beautiful vapor trap glitch. And so one has to find a musical sort of tone and aesthetic, and then one has to make it work harmoniously in key. You're scoring the thing here, but it also has to kind of go on the emotional journey and kind of hit the points and sort of accentuate what's already there. A lot of the effect of these things is subconscious. You know, I don't want it to be. People sometimes hit me up and like, oh, you should do an auto-tune thing, or you should do like the Kathy Newman like remix and make it, you know, make it a big banging trap thing or something. But there's lots of people doing silly things like that on YouTube, and I'm trying to do something a lot more subtle. So it's a case of just slightly retiming the speaking so that it's in time with the music, cutting out ums and ahs and things of that nature, occasionally repeating things for emphasis, and occasionally like just timing, you know, retiming and things of that nature. It makes you really appreciate Peterson even more. He's very easy to work with as his voice as an instrument, because he speaks very deliberately and sonorously and rhythmically. Anyway, he actually speaks in a kind of form of rhythmic poetry. Sometimes he is actually rapping. You don't really need to do that much retiming on him sometimes, and you've got like bits of a rap song. He just does that naturally. And then other people don't necessarily do that. You're very good as you don't do, but you know you've got a training, so you're not umming and ahhing and what have you. Some of the subjects of your film did require a lot of tidying up to get to the more musical nature of what they were doing, and some less so. Camille Pagley is very funny. I'd wanted to do something with her anyway.
I imagine she'd be like a speed garage kind of track.
Oh, she's brilliant. And I was thinking of doing a mini Paglia wave anyway. She talks about aesthetics a lot, which is like perfect for that world. Yeah. I don't know how much you know about that, but aesthetic is a big part of the vaporwave thing. It's almost the core of it. It's the aesthetic.
I don't really know what vaporwave is. I saw that on your bio.
You'd like it. It's ironic. Some have pointed out to use it, use aspects of it, because it's postmodern music. Right. And its original idea was a postmodern idea, and a lot of it was used to sort of attack capitalism, or at least make statements about capitalism and vacuousness of modern culture and stuff. But it's evolved. So initially, you would take a bit of music and sort of slow it down and loop it forever for like 8 minutes, like a bit of a Diana Ross song or something. You sort of slow it down and then loop it and sort of drag out the pathos from the thing. And you would twin that with visuals, and the visuals would be like sort of pink and blue and Evian water bottles and a bit of a Windows 95 logo or something. All these like bits of our culture that are kind of sort of could be interpreted as sort of dead and purely capitalist and soulless. But then that created a whole subculture then it created brilliant music, as these things always do. And my take on it was fusing it with lo-fi hip-hop and some other things I like trap and just a lot of contemporary sort of music production ideas to create soundscapes of depth and length.
When I first came across it, I assumed that you were American.
Yes.
And it, ironically, I didn't really put this into the Glitch documentary so much, but a lot of what I was talking to Peterson about was synchronicities.
Yes.
synchronicities are like meaningful coincidences that seem somehow to be related to the structure of being. And then I saw your remix of the documentary, and then you happened to be coming to the UK for the first time for 2 weeks after this.
Yes, I haven't been here for 3.5 years, but lo, here I am, and here you are, of course.
Yeah.
These things always happen. Grant Morrison did say that the first step to becoming, he's a chaos magician as well as a writer, and the first step to becoming a magician is to notice synchronicity. You start noticing that, and the more you notice them, the more they occur.
Yeah.
And it's kind of you're aware of the fabric of being. Malcolm X said, when you're noticing synchronicities, you're walking with Allah, was his thing on that. So, it's always been that way. Whenever I'm doing anything in life that's correct and I find I'm on the correct path, and when you're on the correct path, then you notice synchronicities all over the place. And some would say that that's proof that we live in a simulation, and some would say that's proof of God, and there's many people who have all sorts of thoughts about this, but all the observable fact is that when one is observing these things, like, meaning becomes ever more apparent, and the worth of what you're doing becomes ever more apparent. And then it just spawns more stuff.
Interesting that you say as well that Peterson has a very musical or a very performative aspect to his speech, because that also ties into, that's what I really like about his philosophy, is that he talks about performance or aligning yourself with the truth. And if you're aligning yourself with the logos of the creative principle, you would expect for that to have an effect on your actual performance. Yeah. Like, he feels like a very embodied speaker when he's on stage, like he's fully inhabiting the stories that he's telling, and that performative aspect of it seems to me at least also related to what he's talking about, the logos, and incarnating it more in your life and incarnating it more in your being.
Yes. And watching him become that over the years, because he was not always as confident and able to just... Now, he freestyles, right? His whole career... Rapping, yeah, his whole career has really reminded me of... It's very... 50 Cent, for example, got big off the back of drama. There was created drama, beefs with other rappers and being shot 13 times and all this stuff, which draws people into the story. But then he had this huge body of work, and that kept people there. Peterson did this. Peterson had these public dramas, and that brought people to him. But then when they got to him, there was this huge body of work for them to get sort of lost and immersed in. And Peterson has some kind of drama like every week at this point. He's like the ultimate sort of contemporary battle rapper. He's at war with all sorts of people at all times, and it's brilliant and very interesting. And if you're into, if you're a rap fan, or if you're if you're a intellectual dark web or whatever the hell it is fan, it's like this guy's getting incredible beefs every week, right? And there's a new sort of supervillain to root against every week with regards to him, or if you're on his side or not. The whole thing's very entertaining, but then it pulls you in, and then there's all this meaning and this huge body of work. But he's quite new on this. Like, if you watch him like 15 years ago, he was a bit awkward and he was very charming, and he knew what he was talking about. But the absolute fucking beast that he has become as a performance creature, who can now just rock up at an amphitheater and just like freestyle a new 2-hour lecture off the top of his head, and he's very into not repeating himself too much, and it's like, you go see a stand-up comedian, you'll see pretty much the same set every week for like a year or something, right? He won't do that. He's more like a very good DJ. Yeah. Like, he has like a fistful of things that he knows works together, and they're linked, and he can take you on these different journeys, but depending on who's in the room and where he is, he will create a new and transformative always experience.
Yeah, and he also describes that as a dialogue. Yeah. Even if he's the only one speaking. Yes. He's speaking deliberately, and if you watch some of the lectures in his classroom, you'll see him pick out one person at a time to speak to, and then he'll change what he's saying based on their facial reactions, their response. If he says something that's a little bit too much, you can see him correcting himself in the moment or adding a bit more context. So it is a very live,
I'm a very good DJ, and if you're a very good DJ, that's exactly what you do. You don't just go in there and like play 30 records in a sequence that you've already preordained. You go in there and you have some idea of where you want to go, and maybe where you want to end up taking these people, but it's all very different depending on who's in the room and who walks in at any given point, or how they react to one thing at any given point and all that. And yeah, he's become quite masterful at that.
So he's a great battle rapper, he's a great DJ.
Yes, he's the kind of, he's like the perfect contemporary pop star. And now pop stars are also neutered and boring. I mean, God, if you look at rap now compared to rap in the 90s, the stuff that Biggie was saying that he would do to you and your mother and all that sort of thing, doesn't happen anymore. Even rappers have just become very, very self-conscious and scared to offend. So there's certain things they're allowed to say and certain groups they're allowed to say things about, but they stay away for the most part of stuff, which is why one of the many reasons instrumental hip-hop is now the biggest genre on YouTube.
Can you talk through the process of making, say, the 12 Rules for Life piece, which I've played a few times and keep getting more out of it?
The process of making 12 Rules for Life was completely different to my previous process, which was I wanted to put across Peterson's ideas in the form of sort of arcing stories over lo-fi music that would take you on an emotional journey that was doing a similar thing. So I would find little bits of lots of different lectures, and I'd often find him talking about the same thing, but over the course of 20 years in different lectures, and tell that story from lots of little pieces.
So what was his response? Because you said you've been in touch with him. What did he make of it?
Yeah, he really liked it. He loves it. He says it's very surreal. He asked me to come and perform with him at the Orpheum in Los Angeles. He wanted me to come down and sort of DJ and open the thing, but unfortunately the Orpheum wouldn't accommodate that at such late notice. But yeah, he had that show, and my whole thing with 12 Rules was to get it done in time to be around the time he put the book out, and so that when he played in Los Angeles it would be ready. And yeah, he was very into it, and I spoke with his wife Tammy afterwards, and she said they both loved it and were really kind of amazed at how it was actually good and sort of not ridiculous. And he just finds the whole thing very, 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 very surreal. Yeah. And he said, when he wrote to me, he said, this is surreal. But yeah, he was thinking about using tracks from it to like open his lectures. Great. And he's going on tour later this year.
It must be incredibly bizarre for him. I mean, he's become sort of the biggest internet meme of this year, if not
especially
last year as well.
At this point in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It must be a very strange...
Doing something for decades and decades. He's been doing this very specifically, very dedicatedly, getting up at the same time every day, working till the same point of night since 1983, I believe it was. Was it 83 or 89? But anyway, on the same subject, with the same goal, and technology's just grown up around him, and suddenly there's a way of disseminating all this stuff, and he'd been very cannily recording all of his lectures and keeping all that, and like we were saying, so then he has this vast library, this vast back catalogue. So if you were just getting into him, which really everyone is, even over the past year or whatever, you know, you could spend years going through this stuff. Yeah. And that's a very powerful and transformative process for anybody, no matter what period of your life. I have a lot of people write to me because the music aspect of it is very helpful to some people. It's like, I had one guy write to me, he had a friend who was a smackhead, and he was trying to get him into Peterson. He couldn't be asked to read, and he couldn't be asked to watch a lecture, and then he gave him one of my mixes, and then he really got into it through that. And now he's off smack, and he's like taking acting classes, and he's turned his deceptive ways into acting, and now he's got a bit part in a film, and this all happened in like 3 months, you know. Wow. But I have a lot of people, and I have like a lot of old, like a guy, 70-year-olds saying, you know, this stuff, I got into it through the musical aspect and through my son or whatever, and this is changing my life, and I'm 70, and now I'm really excited about the future and stuff. A lot of people are terrified of the future, and a lot of people think that we're kind of doomed, and even Peterson's has a very dark outlook, but also a very hopeful one. Because the end result of this mass, the conspiracy types about 10 years ago would all talk about a mass awakening, right? When we all worked out that the people behind the news had agendas, and that the people in control didn't really like us that much. And they would talk about this mass awakening. But there is a mass awakening, but the real mass awakening is people just becoming educated on all the stuff that the smartest amongst us worked out over the past couple of 100 years, but wasn't privy to that many people. Yeah. The internet democratized many, many things, and the first thing it did was with music, and I was there and I saw it happen, and I saw record labels collapsing, and I saw my A&R guy get sacked after my first record deal almost instantly because the bottom just fell out. And suddenly anyone could make music in their own home, and anyone could upload it, and anyone could take it from wherever. And then that started happening with TV, and then it started happening with journalism, and then it starts happening with money because of Bitcoin. It's happening with everything, and it's happened with education. Now anyone can go on YouTube and like learn something that previously you had to go to university for years and years to learn, and you can get right to the core of what you want to know, and you can compare and contrast with some other fucking smart people, and the smartest people. You can have the best teachers in the world. It's right there. So there's your awakening.
You have,
It's
yeah.
amazing.
I'm more, especially since the intellectual dark web idea, I'm more reassured that the internet does have this double side, because it's very.
Give me your take on that.
Well, I work in journalism.
Yes.
So it's terrifying to me that it's destroying journalism. Like it's destroying. It takes time to do good journalism. It takes time to research. It takes effort.
Yes.
And I also think that the filter bubble. We've created tools that reward the lowest aspects of ourselves: our narcissism, our need for validation, our tribalism. These are the tools that we've got from the internet thus far.
Yes.
And they've been very deliberately developed to hack our dopamine systems, to hack our neurology for money. It's like a late-stage capitalism model for this new, very, very powerful technology. And so I've been very pessimistic about that for quite a while.
Yes.
And it's not until probably quite recently when I've seen the emergence of the intellectual dark web, which I talk about in The Glitch a little bit, as a kind of group of countercultural thinkers who are kind of exposing the way that a lot of the media especially has been engaged in groupthink, which is why Trump came as such a surprise, which is why Brexit came as such a surprise. And so I'm now seeing, before I really saw the sort of dystopian nature of, well, we're destroying truth, we're undermining all of our sources of truth. Now I'm starting to see that there is a sort of self-generated, the best ideas winning aspect that's going on at the same time that you're seeing through like the Joe Rogan podcast, for example, and the Dave Rubin show, of these guys finding each other. Yep. The Ben Shapiros, the Jordan Petersons, the Eric Weinsteins of this world are starting to be self-selected by the internet at the same time as you're having a lot of things being eroded away. Yeah. And that's giving me a little bit of hope. I still think things are going to get really rocky before, because what we're seeing is the destruction of all of the structures. All the structures everywhere are being undermined by the force of technology.
Well, it's anything that's a middleman, is what it is. So the universities with middlemen for knowledge, and then what's happened? Who said? Was it anyway? As this happens, everyone pivots to sort of being entertainment or gossip. So news used to just give you news, and then you can get news from all over the place, and a random guy on Twitter. So news becomes a sort of entertainment thing, and it's got a slant and it's got a gossipy angle, and that's what it does. And education has done the same thing. They all do that. So you're not seeing the destruction of the whole thing, you're seeing the destruction of the middleman, or Yeah. But the actual knowledge itself isn't being destroyed.
No.
And the access to the knowledge is actually increasing.
Yeah.
And while there's the initial, which was the meme that was put out by the media that was scared, the fake news meme, right? Oh, you can't trust all these guys because they're not us, but that backfired on them, because then you can see a million examples of where they have themselves deliberately misinformed or, been insincere or whatever for deliberate reasons. So they kind of destroyed themselves. It was like the final blow was dealt by themselves with that. And then people aren't as stupid as they've been made out to be.
Which also makes a lot of sense. It's like the death spiral of the media, as their kind of audiences are declining, is itself now part of the problem, because they are being forced into more and more clickbaity kind of stories themselves.
Because they've become this clickbaity lunatic asylum.
Yeah.
But what that means is, like we were saying, the algorithm thing, it means suddenly you can watch a person having a really, really in-depth conversation with another person, and they're educated on a subject, and you can watch them doing it for hours. Whereas in the previous model, you'd see 5 minutes, The Kathy Newman thing, This Is Your World. If you were watching that on television, you'd see 5 minutes edited down to a little thing, and might distract you from your chips or whatever and get you a bit annoyed. But that it's on the internet, you can sit there and watch that thing for an hour, and then you can really think about it, and then you can go watch both of those people talking about other things at length. And this is a much more heightened state of awareness and consciousness and sort of being than anyone had previously. You know, I think about...
But it also then puts the onus on the individual as well.
Yeah.
There's a kind of democratization of it.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that everyone's suddenly be super smart overnight and that, like, you know, the world is saved in that fashion, but it means that you have a generation growing up who expect something a lot more.
Something that was limited to a very small number of people. I mean, the universities used to be for the aristocracy.
Exactly.
Now anyone with a smartphone has access to pretty much all of the world's knowledge
Exactly.
that's ever existed. And this is...
You've got the Library of Alexandria in your pocket at all times.
Yeah.
Everybody does.
I think you follow the same stoic...
I love that guy. He follows me.
Right.
He only follows 82 people. I'm really hoping he starts talking, because he would be a great source of audio material. But that last point is an important point, because this was Orwell wrote about this many years ago. There's a certain class who claim to be, you know, fighting for and arguing for the working classes, but they actually hate the working classes. They look down their nose at them, and the Brexit made this so apparent. You know, you've got this kind of sort of elite core, liberal core in London who hate the rest of the country and think that they're all racist scumbags and have no empathy whatsoever for their actual lives and what all these policies have actually done to their day-to-day lives. They don't care. They hate them. And the only thing they hate more than them are the really rich. Yeah. And that was the case hundreds of years ago, and it's still the case.
The frame that I look at things through is similar to Peterson, a sort of Jungian lens, and the idea of the shadow. Yes. And the shadow is sort of all of the parts of yourself that you repress and deny. Mm-hmm. And what it feels like to me is that this democratization of everything is allowing all of the shadow aspects of our culture to come to the surface. Yeah. And so the process we're going through, and this is so clear with Trump, it's like Trump, you couldn't design America's id more better than Trump. It's like it's everything that America wants to deny about itself, the narcissism, the worship of wealth for its own sake. I mean, all of these aspects of America that we know are part of the American character, but Americans don't really want to admit that they're part of them, or liberal Americans don't want to admit they're part of the American character. So I see on so many levels we have these figures emerging as the id or the shadow of these different, and our task is to integrate them. And yes. So it's just kind of say, okay, so what does Trump say about me? Yeah. Or what does, all of these figures, all of it's like, what part of myself is Trump representing, for example? But this is why it's the sort of the deep, to why I think Peterson's so interesting as well, that we need a deep mythological structure to make sense of all this, archetypes, and the idea of, this sort of Jung, who seems to have gone deeper into the human soul than just about anyone in the 20th century, is like probably the key guide that we need now to kind of get through the next 10 years or so. Yeah, exactly. Maybe less, because things are happening remarkably speedily. Yeah. Like, seriously, think, like, rewind 5 years, it's like a different world, completely different world. It's like, if you look at like meme culture and how important meme culture has become, like, Trump was partly elected because of memes. Meme humor is black. It is as dark as anything. It is pure darkness. Yesterday, a British man was found guilty and is looking at a year in prison for a meme. You know about this guy? Yeah,
Count Dankula.
Yeah.
But what he did was his joke to annoy his girlfriend was teaching his girlfriend's dog to respond to Hitler quotes by doing a Heil, a Sieg Heil, or whatever you call that thing.
Are we allowed to find that funny?
I thought it was hilarious, but that's because I have quite dark humor anyway, and I was a big Brass Eye fan, and now the world is Brass Eye, right? And that's just where we are. But this guy's going to jail. But the thing is, you look at any meme group on the internet, this is like half of Facebook is what they call dank memes, which is basically Hitler jokes, and that used to be that was what John Cleese did. That's like what's his name? Graham Lynham, who's like very very vocal social justice guy on Twitter. Like Father Ted was full of Nazi jokes, and suddenly Nazi jokes because they're being made by commoners with YouTube channels, and like, you know, they're awful. But like, all of meme culture is black and dark and full of sorrow. All of contemporary rap music, sort of the underground stuff that then influences the mainstream, is dark as hell, and it's all suicide and I want to kill myself, and just gothness is vast right now, and that shadow side is the biggest thing within culture everywhere, within comedy, within music. Within
Saying it's kind of erupting out of everywhere.
Yeah, in everything, in every aspect. Anything I look at, any of the worlds that I pay attention to. And I saw this coming because 2010 was the high. 2010 we were quite psychedelic. The biggest musical force culturally was Odd Future, who wore tie-dye shirts with unicorns and cats on them, and they were multi, you know, they were black kids and white kids, and they didn't have any axis to grind about anything to do with race or anything like that. And it was all very jolly and nice, and everyone was doing Molly, which was ecstasy, and everyone was doing mushrooms and acid. And after a psychedelic thing, it always swings back to a nihilist dark thing culturally. It's usually about every 7 years. So it was definitely going to go goth, and lo, it did. And now all the drugs people are taking are kind of like speedy, cokey type drugs, and everyone's dressed in black and talking about suicide, and all these things are erupting. But this is coinciding with this technological shift, so it's the biggest we've ever seen this happen.
Right.
And it's happening across the whole West.
So it's like it's a catalyst or a magnifier is the technology.
Yeah.
This is partly us looking through the kind of wrong end of the telescope, and one of the things that the news media does is we look back. It's like a fractal pattern, and the fractal pattern is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because we look back at, say, the late 60s and we think, oh wow, it was tie-dye, it was acid, everyone was doing it. It's like, no, the fact that we know about it means it wasn't everyone doing it. The news media will focus on what is unusual. So maybe like 1/10 of 1%, if that, are doing this. Yeah. This culture, whatever it is, and we look back at kind of the acid period or the goth period or the punk period, and we assume these were era-defining, meaning everyone was doing it. No, these were era-defining because they were unusual.
It was a small group of outliers every time, but every time you think of it like a pendulum, think of it like a fucking lump hammer on a rope, right? And it's swinging back and forward, and every time it smashes the wall a bit bigger, and every time there's more people like hanging onto the thing, and it does this like every 7 years. You can look back at our history and it does it. But now it's fucking vast, and now it's like a fucking nuke, and every time it smashes on either side, it's like a nuke's dropped. So we're gonna go full blown psychedelic again in a couple, like 3 years or something. We're gonna come out of the dark nihilistic lunacy thing. We're gonna be integrating our shadows in a fucking ridiculous Technicolor thing en masse, because we're all now completely connected. We're all completely sort of digitally fused in some fashion. And everyone's kind of used to it by this point. So that's when you have real radical societal change, and that's when it's, I would say, likely to be incredibly positive.
Are you positive or negative about the future?
Yeah, very positive. This is the best time to be alive in recorded human history for everybody. More people drinking clean water, more people with access to information, children not dying immediately, like women able to wander around outside without like rocks being thrown at them, without being fully clothed. Like whatever it is, any aspect you can think of is massively better now than it was even like 10, 20 years ago. You know, it's an incredible time to be alive. As we were saying, we all have these little machines with us that you can look at the negative aspects of those, fine, but the potential positive aspects of them is fucking bonkers.
But it's also, I mean, I agree. And I also believe that it's true that, like Brett Weinstein said about the evolutionary tools that have brought us to where we are likely to end in a catastrophe unless we evolve beyond them. And I think Jordan Greenhall, I agree. I think it's, I hope so. When you look at sort of politics, or you look at kind of what's playing out on the more structural level, it's easy to make a case for that we're not.
For as long as I've been alive, we've been like this close to Armageddon at all times, if you're watching the 6 o'clock news. So if that's all you're looking at, then we've been doomed for our entire lives. And that's just always the case. There's always like some tin pot dictator or whatever who's going to drop a bomb or some, whatever the fuck. That's always going to happen. Everyone in the 80s was terrified of nuclear winter, and I read Where the Wind Blows like everybody else did as a small child, and I was like, fuck. But whatever, that's always been going on. That's literally always been the case throughout the entirety of human history. There's always been some barbarians at the gates, or some like great calamity, or some great flood, or whatever the fuck it is. But what we have now that we didn't have before was all of this that we've just been talking about. We have all of this being available to not just a tiny minority of the population, but to the actual majority of our Western populations, and now increasingly the rest of the world. Like fucking every major continent. And the results of this, I think, can only be brilliant. So I think, yeah, I'm very excited about the future, and I think, we're going to see some wonderful, wonderful things just in the next few years.
What is it that you personally get out of Jordan Peterson? What resonated for you when you first started listening to Jordan Peterson?
I think the same thing that resonates with most people, which is meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose and glory of discipline. That whole thing of we've been fed this just fucking just vast diet of rights forever, and the whole personal responsibility. And it's always been a big thing of mine. My whole first album was about the individual and the right of the individual and the necessity of the individual to change the world and be allowed to be them, and which sampled The Prisoner a lot and stuff. And then the second one was kind of more inward and about like all of us all together and the importance of that. And then you kind of come through that, and it's back to the individual, and like personal responsibility is the thing. What is it I used to say? I used to wander around thinking to myself, only you can save mankind. Because only you can. Only one person taking responsibility for their life and everything around them and then their family and stuff can actually change the world. You can't change the world in a big shouty mob. It's just too messy. And that is and it's just wonderful to see someone communicating the importance and the sort of like transcendental majesty of personal responsibility to a mass of people all at once, just at the point when we needed it most.
Which again goes back to the nature of the internet. I think that's what's amazing about Peterson, is that he's genuinely sort of crowdsourced in terms of his response that he's got from people. I'd love to ask him about this, because I have a sense that he also is quite spooked by that. Because the fact that he's rocketed to fame so quickly shows how needed that message is.
Yeah, well, that's why he cries every time he talks about it. Yeah. Every time he talks about that aspect, he just starts crying almost immediately. Because this whole, he has a son and a daughter. I have a son. This whole, like, the stuff that this foul poison they're trying to put on half of the human population. It could have been completely ruinous. And the Overton window was so far in one direction, and he's almost single-handedly moved the Overton window almost back over here. And if we keep going along this course, and now all these other people are being listened to, like the Overton window can be moved back to a point where we're suddenly not in danger of actually completely destroying half the population in an irreversible fashion. And then we're completely fucked. And then we can get back to the thing where we all work together and we respect our differences as male and female, and we work in glorious unity to further the human experiment and go into the stars and be wonderful creatures out in the universe. And that would be cool and awesome and wonderful. We would literally got to the point where it was right, you guys, half of you are evil scum and should be treated accordingly and should be ashamed for existing, you fucks. And people are starting to think that. There's people thinking that that's true. But I think we've been saved from that precipice, and I think Peterson actually will go down in history as being instrumental in that.
Well, that is something, even just from the men's work that we've done so far. It's interesting that there are a lot of guys from my generation and maybe lower, younger than me, who, you get that sense of kind of internalized shame around themselves as men. Yeah. Which is really kind of...
It's dark. It's like a fucking... Yeah. It's very unhelpful.
Well, nothing comes from shame.
No, nothing good. And nothing good comes from, for God's sake, this is people who didn't do anything being made to feel bad for something that some other people did. And it's not like the Weinsteins are in a majority. It's fucking bizarre. What got you into the whole men's work thing?
I've been doing various sort of personal growth work for quite a long time.
Right.
I experimented with psychedelics quite a lot at university, and then when I went into my first sort of personal growth workshops, what I found open up was a very similar space, like this space of freedom and reprogramming myself and kind of really examining my beliefs and challenging myself, and then this sort of sense of flow and freedom would come in.
Yeah.
We'd sort of started teaching men's work at that point. I'd been leading a men's group, and then we started we did a weekend, a day-long workshop, and then we started doing weekends. And it was then at the time of the Trump election that I was like, wow, these gender dynamics are playing out on the wider stage. And when I started kind of learning more about Jung and the idea of the anima and the animus, and it's like, wow, this is almost like the secret key to everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And I really feel that men's work at the moment is almost countercultural.
Oh, that was my other point. Well, the other thing I think is interesting is that like this stuff is the new counterculture. Yeah. It really, really is. It is in no way like edgy or rebellious to be doing any of that social justice type stuff. That is the mainstream. It's now rebellious to clean up your flipping room. It is countercultural to have your shit in order, to choose a partner and stay with them, to work through things and not just run off at the first sign of danger. It's countercultural to say anything about any kind of men's issue. It's radical. Which is a bizarre bloody thing. This is half the population. You'd think if they are so bad, you'd want them to be sorted and in a decent shape. Yeah. You know, like surely that's helpful. Like all this stuff that you're doing is like punk rock. Yeah. This is the punk stuff now. This is the counterculture now. You can't win the culture war and then also be like counterculture. So the left is in this, you know, odd position now. Yeah. Of kind of thinking of themselves as cool. You look at YouTube and stuff, all the cool young people on YouTube they're in this world. Yeah. They're interested in this stuff and they're talking about this stuff. The biggest young person on YouTube is PewDiePie, and he loves Jordan Peterson and dank memes and lo-fi hip hop and all that stuff. Yeah. That is the counterculture now.
It is the counterculture, and it's also I like what Jordan Greenhall said in the documentary. I don't know if I used that particular clip, but he said that the left has replaced genuine openness with an ideology of openness. Yeah. And I thought that was a really powerful way of looking at it. Yeah. So it's a dogmatic version of openness that is no longer open to many things. I mean, the idea of, and certain things are now not allowed in that worldview. For example, intrinsic differences between men and women.
I saw someone saying yesterday, some biologists saying that it used to be fundamentalist Christians who were the biggest problems for him and attacked his work the most often, and now it's the far left. Yeah. And this is really what's happened. You know, I think most of us used to consider ourselves very left, and I was a Billy Bragg fan and all this sort of stuff. And the people who used to attack the things I liked used to be sort of fundamentalist Christian types, and now they're the people who I thought were like me. And now they're the people saying you can't say this and you have to say that and you can't enjoy this and women need to wear more clothes and all this crazy shit. It's fucking mental.
What I got most from Peterson is that listening to him mapped onto everything that I'd already knew in a way. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of my journey I think has been very different from, like even calling it a journey kind of suggests that I'm coming from a slightly more personal development kind of perspective, but definitely over the last 10 years, as I've done a lot of personal growth work, when I listened to Peterson, I realized that what I was doing was incarnating the Logos more in my own life. That's what I was doing more and more and that allows, then I kind of realized that's what it's about, is kind of the learning your truth and then speaking your truth much more clearly. Yeah. And then a lot of the shadow work that I've done, sort of Jungian shadow work, is then really integrating that sort of, integrating those sort of divorced parts of yourself. It's like in the men's work, the idea is, you've got this kind of, you've got an inner killer. I mean, we have to. I mean, Jesus, we
make yourself a monster.
Yeah, make yourself a monster, or at least understand you have that monstrous aspect to you and get it working for you rather than working against you.
That it has a use in the world.
Yeah, because if you're suppressing your anger, the world is going to trigger you in some way where that anger is going to come out, and then you're a danger to yourself and others because you're not in control of it. And it's like this is really countercultural stuff as well. It's like the idea at the moment is that men must suppress this kind of aspect of themselves. It's like
dreadful idea,
terrible idea.
Oh my God, what a terrible idea. Yeah, it's like no one's read a Hulk comic book or whatever. It's like, you know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what's, I don't know who said recently, but the idea is not that women aren't pissed off with men who are in control of their monsters and their shadows. Men are pissed off with all these other dudes, these like guys who swallowed that whole propaganda and are all thinking they need to act like women and need to suppress that masculinity is inherently toxic, and it's those sorts of men that women don't like and are annoying. These beta-orbiting sort of like creepy sort of.
Well, there was an article in Playboy a couple of days ago about male feminists.
Oh yeah.
How a lot of the people who've been exposed through the Me Too.
Yeah, they all turn out to be male feminists.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's most of them. It's a ridiculous percentage. It turns out it's not these like sort of man's man types who are apparently awful. It turns out to be like the creepy little beta ones. And it's because in a world of sort of like dominance hierarchies or what have you, those who can't survive through traditional means of masculinity come up with sneaky ways of sort of like getting around the edge of it. Yeah, it's like, all right, so if I can't be asked to like, you know, like work out or whatever, or educate myself or become really good at a useful thing that's useful to lots of people, I could do like a sneaky thing and kind of like glom onto some ideology or something, and then maybe I'll get my dick sucked. Yeah. And it's very obvious when you see this. You can see it in their flipping eyes. It's a terrible state of affairs, and nobody likes it, and women don't like it. Yeah. So what are you trying to sort of build here? So are you trying to take your sort of the workshops you're doing onto a sort of global internet level or something? Or
I've been going off instinct so far. Mm-hmm. I know that, like, I'm really deeply involved in ideas and love kind of the whole intellectual dark web, and like where are the conversations happening that are the ones that we need to have to help us evolve to that next level. And I studied philosophy, but I also know from the personal growth work that I've done that unless you're living out an idea in your life, it's not real. And so that's what the personal growth workshops are about. Mm-hmm. And I hope that it gets to the point where we can kind of spread it much wider than it is at the moment. We've run like a few workshops so far, and I think the world is ready for something that's offered in a non-new agey, non kind of sucky aesthetic. And I think Britain is ready for it as well, because we've always been very suspicious of this kind of work in the UK.
Yeah, rightly so.
Rightly
so. I also like that about Peter.
Is part of it.
Yeah, Peterson will always say that as well. He's like, he doesn't like any of that type of stuff. He's a very practical man. So you're taking these sometimes esoteric ideas, but grounding them in a very, especially if you're a male, kind of acceptably practical fashion. We're very practical. Yeah. You know, and women have had things for quite a while and ways to get in touch with their sort of spiritual side and all that sort of stuff, and like yoga and all these things, and mindfulness and stuff. And there's a brilliant practicality to Peterson's approach, which takes quite deep concepts and puts them in a way that can be useful. And I think kind of taking that and actually people doing it in real life and bringing people together so they know that it's not, because if when you're looking at things on YouTube, you could be talking to 1,000 people in the comics section, but you could still feel alone. So bringing this stuff into the world. When I saw Peterson at the Orpheum in Los Angeles, it was Dave Rubin came in and introduced him. And I'm like seeing all these people that I've just seen on the internet, and they're all in a room, and there's like fucking thousands of people in that room, and everyone's like this, oh fucking yeah. I think that doing more of that, and then turning that into internet stuff, so turning that into shows and turning that into vlogs or however you do it, could be really, really useful and kick things up to the next level. Because I think this intellectual dark web thing is just really, really very much the first stage of a much, 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 much bigger thing. It's just the very beginning. It's just scratching the surface of the potentiality of using this medium and kind of like forsaking that which has gone before, which you just assumed was the way things had to be.
And I think what I love about Peterson is he introduces this idea of, okay, how does it feel in your body when you're saying these words?
Exactly.
Like this idea of that you know if you really sense into how your body's feeling when you say certain things, or when you that there is a deeper alignment. Because otherwise it just becomes this sort of intellectual game again.
Yeah, it's practical for an average person who hasn't spent like 30 years like reading Jung
Yeah.
Like, and he's been getting shit for that. Like, you know, some people saying, oh, he's like a idiot, like a thick person, smart person, or whatever. As if that was a bad thing. Like, it's bad to take like big ideas and translate them in a way that a person who hasn't been to university for 30 years can understand. Yeah. That's what we need. That's actually what society needs.
The priesthood complaining about him.
Exactly. This is
taking the sacrament.
Yeah, how dare you? God is not for them, it's for us. Only we can speak with God. Only we can commune with the divine, and then let this is this classism, and this is why it's really interesting seeing it play out in the UK, which is a very class-based society. And it really is that, an intellectual classism and a...
Have you seen anyone else on YouTube or online doing anything similar to what we've done in terms of, like, you've kind of created these epic mixes of Peterson's stuff? I've kind of made a couple of documentaries about his...
No, but they will. They're already starting to.
Yeah.
They're starting to speak.
Is it a coincidence that we're both from the UK?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a point. I wonder. But it's about to be a lot bigger, and it's about to be normal. Yeah. But yeah, this is like a new thing. And it was necessary. You just do things, it's necessary, right? Particularly when you're going off instincts and you're seeing all the synchronicities and stuff. Like, I filled a hole because lots of people just wanted this thing. I have so many people being like, oh, I had that idea, but I didn't do it. Like, oh, I really was hoping someone had done this. People will be literally like Googling like Lo-Fi Peterson to see if it exists, and lo, it does. And same thing with what you're doing. So, you know, let's do lots more of it, and lots of other people will start doing it. But I think you've got a real potentiality for creating something quite vast and important. But you just have to work. You have to do a lot. Yeah. You have to feed the algorithms. Yeah. YouTube requires content 3 times a week at least. Wow. Over 10 minutes. And if you start doing that, you'll see your numbers going up pretty fast. And this is what I've been seeing. Like, I'm putting on like 150 subscribers a day on YouTube at the moment, just like every day, and doing like sort of 20,000 views a day. And the fucking graphs are all like boom, like that. But it's like, as I've started implementing like quite a rigid sort of content schedule and stuff, you see it really rocketing.
Any more Peterson stuff coming up?
Oh yeah, of course. The thing with Peterson, I mean, I was saying this to his wife, it's like when you're making music and writing and stuff, oftentimes you quote the greats. And, you know, you quote a Hunter S. Thompson, or you quote a Young or whatever. But they're all dead. You know, and if there are audio recordings of them, they're not very good. And there aren't that many of them. And here we have Peterson, like spitting fucking napalm on a daily basis, like dropping like hours of audio every day, and it's all fucking brilliant, and it's all incredibly quotable, and it's also incredibly sonorous, musical, and beautiful, and important, and necessary right now. If I did nothing else in my life, if I didn't even eat, I could just sit there making Peterson music forever, because there's so much material. So I will continue to make Peterson stuff, and it will continue to be useful, and there's also many, many other things to draw into music and make useful in that fashion. It's basically, it appears to be a new genre, or at least a new way of sort of communicating ideas and stuff. And I've always done it. I've always made mixtapes that brought in people talking and bringing in ideas and made it musical, but just like now there's a real big appetite for it, and thanks to those lovely robots over at YouTube, it's just this expanding universe of potential for people actually wanting to listen to it and being able to do it.
Do you think there will be a JB Peterson lo-fi genre?
Well, there is.
Well, I mean, you're the only one so far.
I mean, well, no, other people are doing it now. If you go look it up, there's actually loads of people doing it now, to like varying degrees of sort of success, but lots of people are doing it. And I've been doing, you know, it with other things, and it's called Meaning Wave now. Someone called it that in a comment.
So there is a genre.
It's now, yeah, it's a thing. It's called Meaning Wave. It combines music aesthetics of lo-fi and vaporwave and vapor trap and cloud rap, and with meaningful spoken stuff.
So it's not just Peterson?
No, it's kind of like the intellectual dark web thing, I guess, but with music. I've been doing lots of them, but now other people are doing it. So yeah, I mean, just in the past couple of weeks, I did a thing with Jocko Willink, Morrissey, Bukowski, I did an audio movie version of Harrison Bergeron. And then I was doing that, and I've always loved that story. And in my research, I found that Peterson had read it. In one of his fireside chats, he just read the story. But I used someone else's voice on that. Anyway, that's been very popular. So yeah, I'm doing lots of that stuff, but lots of other people are doing it too. And I'm actually expecting at some point in the not too near future, one of these things will end up like transcending the internet and becoming an actual hit. And then there'll be loads of it.
Great.
So, yeah. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, Akira, thank you very much.
Thank you, Philly David.
And so what you've just seen is awe-inspiring. You've seen someone courageously move past perfection into the unknown, and not only ennoble themselves more, but to ennoble humanity itself. Up on your feet. It's like, yes! And then it's tens. They win the gold. Well, everyone knows what that's like. It's like a great musical performance. That's being in that place where everything lines up. Better than perfect. Better than